Husband's been sneaking out early mornings to meet a woman in a different town without telling me, and I know how dramatic that sounds when I say it out loud because I'm 33, and I design cities for a living, an urban planner with a very sensible haircut and a calendar that looks like a game of Tetris, so I prefer problems with crosswalks and zoning codes and diagrams that fit neatly on paper, not problems that get up at 4:37 a.m., tie their shoes quietly in the dark and say things like, "I'm just going for a run, babe," while the coffee machine pretends not to overhear. The first morning I noticed, it was the shoes. He moved through the bedroom like a documentary about stealth, pillow tilt, blanket tuck, the softest click of a dresser drawer, and then that tiny plasticky whisper of laces sliding tight. I rolled over, half awake, and checked the time. 4:37, he kissed my hair, which I hate because it feels like a stamp of innocence, and he whispered, "Just a run. It's going to be a hot day." Then the door clicked, and the house did that hollow thing houses do when someone leaves, it sighed. Do you know how you can be asleep and also suddenly a historian of shoe noises? That was me. I lay there analyzing the rhythm. My husband, Jonah, is a 5K on weekends person, not a 4:37 a.m. before sunrise person. He's a high school science teacher who wears mismatched socks and knows all the constellations and once cried at a commercial where a golden retriever learns to skateboard. He was not the guy who lies about sneakers. But 2 days later, same hour, same whisper, same stamp of innocence. And then again. When you plan cities, you learn patterns the way sailors learn tides. 3 times is not a coincidence, it's a route. I tried to not be that person. I told myself he'd joined some terrible motivational run club called the Sunrise Wolves where they meditate on stoicism and eat chia seeds in the parking lot. I waited for him to brag about it, post a sweaty selfie, tell me about a guy named Chad who says crushing it a lot. Silence. Meanwhile, weird crumbs started appearing in our life. Literally, crumbs. A white sugar dust I did not own showed up on the passenger floor mat of his car like ghost confetti. Receipts fell out of his jacket pocket, coffee, pastry from a town an hour north of us. The receipt had a smiley face on it and a small heart where the barista had written, "See you tomorrow." I stared at it on our kitchen counter, this harmless square of thermal paper, and my stomach learned a new low note it had never sung. Also, there was the toll. This is how unromantic betrayal is. It shows up on your bank statement as Riverbridge AUTH 6:12 a.m. $3.50. My job makes me collect tiny facts like seashells, and these were very shiny. But I am also the daughter of 2 sweet hippies who believe in talking about your feelings, so I tried that first. I asked him at dinner, casual as knitted socks. "Hey, where have your runs been taking you?" He stabbed his broccoli like it owed him money and said, "Just down by the river. You know. The fog looks cool." "The fog," I said, like that answered all the receipts. "Cool." He smiled too wide. If you've never seen your husband do community theater at your dining table, I do not recommend it. Here's the thing I didn't tell him, I had already followed him once. Not because I'm inherently sneaky, but because I woke up at 4:35 and the adrenaline in my hands said, "We're field tripping today, Ada." I threw on an old hoodie and the kind of glasses that make me look like I'm trying to read the emotional temperature of a room, and I drove our hatchback a block behind his. It felt surreal, like watching our life from the mezzanine. The city was washed in that pre-dawn gray where everything looks like a photograph of itself. He got on the highway north. He took the bridge. My chest counted each green sign like a metronome, exit 24, exit 29, exit 33. And then he got off in Millerton. Millerton is the kind of town that sells candles that smell like harvest. It has one main street with a diner that's been there since people thought smoking inside was sexy. Jonah parked not at the trailhead or the park by the river but outside the diner. He checked his phone with that nervous thumb scroll that says, "Please be where you said you'd be." A woman in a mustard yellow raincoat walked up. She had a blue knit hat on even though it wasn't cold, and the way he hugged her made my head tilt in a way that must have looked very French. Not a desperate, grabby hug. Not a mother-sister-friend pat-pat. A soft, practiced hug you'd give someone who's shampoo, you know. I sat there in our car with its crumbless floor mats and I watched my husband hold a woman whose name I did not know, and the part of my brain that usually maps traffic patterns tried to chart my own heart. It didn't compute. I didn't cry, not right then. I just wrote down the time like I was writing down when the light goes green. 6:11 a.m., Jonah meets Yellow Raincoat. Then they went inside the diner and the world kept spinning like a rude carousel. I did not go in. I drove home with my fingers wrapped so tight around the steering while they left ghosts. I fed the sourdough starter because it was something alive that relied on me. The cat stared at me like, girl. At 8:20, Jonah arrived with a paper bag that smelled like sugar and a face that said, lie but make it adorable. He kissed my forehead. Brought you a cronut, he said. It's new at the Riverside Cafe. Thought you'd like it. I put the bag on the counter next to the receipt from Milliton's Diner and felt my spine grow 1,000 tiny teeth. I love when my pastries commute, I said, my voice so light it floated away. We did a terrible thing then. We went to work. Like regular people. He kissed the top of my head and I didn't flinch because denial is a powerful sedative. I cycled to the office and spent 4 hours pretending to care about curb radii while a part of me stared at a yellow raincoat inside my skull. 2 days later, I followed again. Consider this my confession. The city was quieter this time, my brain was louder. He took the same exit, the same parking spot. She wore a green coat because the mustard yellow was probably wet somewhere, drying on a chair he sits at sometimes. This time they didn't go into the diner. They walked down the side street to a small park where morning glories climbed a fence with the kind of optimism that makes me suspicious. They sat on a bench. He took off his cap. She touched his hair and he closed his eyes like she was a song. I made a sound I have never heard myself make. Small, animal, pulled from a place that predates zoning. I drove back home and when he returned with more imported pastries and a story about trying a new river loop, I said, either Milliton has relocated to our river or your lie has. He put the bag down like it was suddenly full of bricks. He looked at the receipt on the counter. I had placed it there like a museum plaque. He saw the toll on the bank statement on the laptop, opened to the month's breakdown like it had something to say. He reached for my hand and I moved it. It hovered in the air like a confused drone. He set it down on the counter. He didn't cry. He did something worse. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and now finally shamefully got to breathe. Her name is Elise, he said. The name skittered across our kitchen like a dropped spoon. We met at a teacher conference last year. We kept in touch. It felt like a good conversation I wasn't having anywhere else. He said it like that would make it literature. We hadn't, and here he paused, and I saw the fork in his mind, the choose-your-own adventure of whether to claim virtue. We hadn't done anything past talking and hugging. Yet. I know that doesn't fix anything. This is the moment everyone wants to know about later. Did I scream? Throw the cronut? Become a statue? I did none of those. I did the most me thing possible. I asked follow-up questions. How long? I said. Since June, he said, looking at the fridge magnets like they might free him, the one that says you are here above a tiny dot, the one that's a llama in sunglasses. How many mornings? 7, he said. 8. I lost count. No, 7. I think 7. The science teacher trying to be precise now. What do you tell her about me? That you're brilliant, he said too fast, and I hated him for weaponizing my resume in his romance. That you work too much. That I feel old. Tired. That I don't know where we're going. That I'm scared to say any of that to you because you're so competent. Because you always know the right map. I sat down. It was either sit or fold like a lawn chair. Jonah, I said, and saying his name like that felt like I was calling a dog from traffic. I design roads because they keep people from crashing into each other. Not because I prefer asphalt to humans. Silence. The cat sneezed as if punctuating my point. You could have told me you were lonely. You could have told me you wanted 4:37 a.m. back. You could have told me anything but a lie. I know, he said, and the worst part was that he sounded like he did. I kept telling myself I'd figure out how I felt before I told you because I didn't want to hurt you if it turned out to be nothing. Ah yes, I said. The classic protect you by lying to you move. A gentleman's betrayal. He winced. I deserve that. No, I said, because I am sometimes more decent than I want to be. You deserve better language. You deserve what you gave yourself at 4:37 a.m., the truth. He told me the truth. It wasn't cinematic. It was a spreadsheet. It had dates and times, coffee orders and park benches, texts that were too tender for the hour. He handed me his phone. He opened his messages. Reading them felt like stepping into a house and realizing your furniture is arranged somewhere else. You make mornings feel like a secret, she wrote. I love how the mist looks on the river when you point out the names of the clouds, he wrote. I chose not to howl at love. I saved my voice for things I could control. We made rules. That sounds weird, I know, but when your life is suddenly the chaos of a roundabout at rush hour, you put in yield signs. Rule 1, no more mornings. No more Elise. No more coffee that drives north. Rule 2, he tells her immediately and cleanly that he has crossed a line and is stepping back over it. He does not recruit her to soften my hurt. Rule 3, he moves into the guest room while we figure out whether we are a renovation or demolition. Rule 4, we get help. He texted her while I watched. It was oddly formal. I've hurt Ada. I've disrespected our marriage. I'm sorry for the harm this causes you, but my priority now is repair and honesty. She replied with something surprisingly kind and also not my business. He blocked her, and then we both stared at the screen like it might catch fire. The next morning I woke up at 4:37 because that's how bodies work. I lay there in the dark, breathing like I was practicing being a person. He didn't move. He didn't put on his shoes. The silence felt like both punishment and mercy. I got up. I walked to the kitchen. I watched the coffee machine do its little burbling ritual and I whispered, "Thank you," to a device because I needed to be grateful for something domestic that would not lie to me. We went to therapy. Do you know how awkward it is to tell a stranger about your spouse's 4:37 a.m. hobby? Our therapist, a woman named Dr. Green with a laugh that makes you want to confess every sin, asked unsexy questions that turned out to be explosives. When did your marriage stop having mornings? She asked. I didn't know it had. Turns out we had replaced them with logistics, bills, schedules, lesson plans, public hearings. I was always doing city council meetings at 7 p.m., he was grading papers at 10. We were two excellent adults scheduled into parallel competence. Meanwhile, the softness, the dumb jokes in the supermarket aisle, the shoulder bump while brushing teeth, the make us tea without asking, that softness starved. We built new mornings. Not daily, no one needs romance with an attendance sheet, but enough. Thursdays we walk to the river together and identify the clouds like nerds. Saturdays we go to the farmer's market and buy the ugly tomatoes because they taste like summer and honesty. Sundays we make a rule to tell each other one thing we're scared of, that is not the economy. Do I trust him? This is the million-dollar question people slide across cafe tables with their eyebrows. Trust is not a switch, it's a scaffolding. I add a bar every day he does what he says he will. He texts when he leaves school. He brings home receipts like little flags planted on the hill of transparency. He stinks at lying now. It's as if some internal wire that let him dissociate has been rerouted into a smoke alarm. Sometimes at 4:37, I wake up and look at him and he is asleep, drooling. The drool is oddly comforting. Nothing illicit has drool. Friends have opinions. Jazz wants him launched into the sun. My brother wants to accompany me to Militon with a boom box and a speech. My mother wants to know if Elise has bangs because she thinks women with bangs have agendas, which is unfair but also made me laugh so hard I forgave her for existing. I listen, I thank, I return to my scaffolding. Anger is a wild animal. You cannot let it drive, but you also shouldn't chain it in the yard. I let mine ride shotgun and we listen to podcasts. Sometimes I imagine a version of this where I stormed the diner. where I walked over with my chin like a lighthouse and said, "Hello, I'm the wife, the river flows both ways." I would have walked away with a movie scene and a story that played better at parties. Instead, I have what I have: receipts, therapy, a husband who makes tea at 4:39 because sometimes we both wake up and sit there in the kitchen like earthquake survivors, touching each other's elbows like they might evaporate. He asked me once, when we were doing the bone-dry work of divvying up chores as if that could hold a heart, "Why didn't you leave right away?" I told him the truth, which is the only thing I have that isn't sticky with sugar dust. Because you were a person I chose on a Tuesday in October when nothing dramatic was happening, and I still believe in that chooser. Because I'm not done being her. Because if I leave, I want it to be because I am walking towards something, not just sprinting away from a bench in Milliton. Will we make it? I don't know. Some days feel like fresh paint, some feel like a wall I've sanded so many times I can see through to the studs. What I do know is that I am not trying to be a perfect wife with a perfect city of a marriage. I am trying to be Ada, who loves where the sidewalks meet, who believes in the bright vulgarity of farmers market tomatoes, who can say I'm lonely without it sounding like an indictment. We keep a jar on the counter labeled mornings. We put little slips of paper in it with ideas, cinnamon rolls and crosswords, sunrise bike ride, lie in bed and name the birds we can hear. Sometimes we pull one at random. Sometimes we ignore the jar and sleep. Sometimes our cat sits on the jar because she thinks she's hilarious. He hasn't been to Milliton since. I've checked exactly once, and then I told him I had checked, and we sat with that until the air stopped tasting like a courtroom. I don't want to be his parole officer. I want to be his wife, or something truer than that word had become when the pastry started commuting. If your gut is whispering to you at 4:37 a.m., I'm not here to tell you to stay or go. I'm here to say you are allowed to write things down. You are allowed to follow a car once and then never again. You are allowed to insist that apologies be boring, not poetic. You are allowed to be the woman who has a sensible haircut and a spreadsheet, and also a soul that wants to dance in a parking lot to a street musician you've never met. You are allowed to build a new map, one where the legend includes grief and croissants and group therapy and kissing in the kitchen while the coffee machine burbles its consent. This morning he woke me by accident because he sneezed. It was 4:42, technically a different era. "Sorry," he whispered, and then, "Want tea?" We made tea. We sat at the table with our knees touching like two kids at an exam. "Clouds will be low today," he said, trying on the voice he used in Milliton but keeping it here with me. "Stratus," I said, bossy on purpose. We shared a smile that wasn't a stamp or a bribe. The day rolled in. The jar on the counter glinted. The cat tyrant that she is knocked a pen onto the floor so I would pick it up and write this down, so I would remember the route back to myself as a path I lay brick by brick, even in the dark, even when the toll costs $3.50 and your heart insists on paying cash.